You know, when we look at the huge, grand buildings in a nation's capital, we're not just looking at stone and steel, we're actually looking at arguments. These powerful statements about history, identity, and power, literally carved into the skyline for all of us to see. So, can a building really be an argument? Oh, absolutely. The answer is a huge yes. Think about it. A building's design, the materials it uses, the symbols all over it, they're all telling a story. And sometimes these stories can even argue with each other right across time. And that's exactly what's happening in the heart of India's capital, New Delhi. We've got two massive structures, the colonial-era Rashtrapati Bhavan, which used to be the Viceroy's house, and the brand-new Parliament House. Each one is making a very, very different case for what India is and what it should be. All right, let's start with the older of the two. This is the Viceroy's house, designed by the British architect Edwin Lutyens. And let me tell you, this was built to be more than just a home. It was meant to be the ultimate symbol of the British Raj, projecting permanence, authority, and power. And a huge part of that message was just its sheer scale. We are talking about 340 rooms. 340? 4 floors? Over 200,000 square feet? This wasn't just a building. It was a declaration of imperial might, specifically designed to dwarf everything and everyone around it. Now, to pull this off, Lutyens used a very particular architectural strategy. Academics have a fancy name for it: hegemonic hybridity. I know, it sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. You take a powerful, dominant Western design, and then you just kind of sprinkle some local Indian flavor on top as decoration. So here's how that playbook works. First, you build a structure that is fundamentally European, with all the classical columns and proportions. Then you add some Indian elements. And this is the absolute key. You use them in a way that completely strips them of their original meaning and function. They just become surface texture. Let's get specific, because this is where it gets really interesting. Take the chaja. That's a traditional Indian eave that's absolutely essential for blocking the harsh sun and monsoon rain. Here, it was just used as a decorative classical frieze. Or the iconic Mughal chhatris, those little domed pavilions. They were only there to make the flat roof line look a bit more interesting. And the beautiful Rajasthani jali screens were basically reduced to an Orientalist texture. The argument the building is making is crystal clear. Indian culture is welcome, sure, but only as decoration on a fundamentally Western structure of power. And this might be the most direct statement of all. This inscription was written by Lutyens himself for the Jaipur column right out front. It's literally a message from the colonizer to the colonized, set in stone for eternity. It's a perfect example of what our source material calls narrative subjugation, using words and symbols to lock in a power imbalance. Okay, now let's fast forward almost 100 years. A brand new building rises right next door, and it's making a completely different argument. The new Parliament House is a deliberate, post-colonial response. It's an attempt to write a totally new chapter in India's architectural story.
I mean, the contrast here could not be more stark. You go from a British architect in the colonial era to an Indian architect in the post-colonial era. The whole core idea shifts from imposing a foreign style to celebrating authentic national symbols. This isn't just a new building, it's a new author telling a completely new story.
And this timeline really puts that whole dialogue into perspective, doesn't it? There's more than a century between the start of these two buildings. And in that century, you saw the end of an empire and the rise of the world's largest democracy. And the new building is designed specifically for that democracy's future. The new Lok Sabha, that's the lower house, can seat 888 members. That's a huge expansion, and it's meant to accommodate a growing nation and its representatives for years to come.
So, if the new parliament is an answer to the old Viceroy's house, what exactly is it saying? Well, it's speaking in a distinctly Indian architectural language, using symbols that are deeply, deeply embedded in the nation's own culture.
So, unlike that superficial ornamentation we saw earlier, here, the symbolism is structural. It's baked right in. The design of the main chambers and the central lounge are all themed around India's national symbols, the peacock, the lotus, and the banyan tree. These aren't just tacked on, they are the very soul of the design, representing a vision of India that's rooted in its own natural and spiritual world. And get this, guarding the entrances aren't lions symbolizing a British empire. No way. Instead, you find creatures from Indian mythology and culture. From the Gaja, the elephant representing wisdom, all the way to the Hampsa, a swan that symbolizes discernment. Each one carries a specific cultural meaning.
It creates a very different kind of welcome than the old classical motifs of the past.
The scale of the storytelling inside is just monumental. I want you to picture two brass murals, each one 75 feet tall. One depicts India's incredible heritage, and the other narrates the epic story of Samudra Manthan, the churning of the cosmic ocean. This is storytelling on an epic scale, celebrating India's own stories.
So, on the surface, it seems like a pretty clear-cut case, right? A new, proud narrative replacing an old, colonial one. But, like any good debate, this one's a little more complicated. The story is definitely still being written. And as you might guess, a project of this size and importance has its critics. This new architectural argument, this new statement, hasn't been accepted by everyone. In fact, its inauguration was surrounded by quite a bit of controversy.
Yeah, the inauguration itself was pretty contentious. 19 opposition parties actually boycotted the ceremony. There was also criticism about the use of specific religious symbolism in what is constitutionally a secular republic. And finally, there was a mural depicting the ancient Mauryan Empire, which some called a Khanbarak, or undivided India, that caused some real diplomatic concerns with neighboring countries.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that this conversation in stone is far from over. These buildings aren't just static monuments from the past. They are active participants in a live, ongoing debate about what it means to be India. A debate that's grappling with its colonial history, its incredibly diverse present, and all of its dreams for the future. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. The dialogue between these two buildings defines a century of unbelievable change. So as India continues to evolve, what arguments will its future buildings make? What stories will they choose to tell?